Hi, I'm Paul Taylor, and in this video presentation, I'm going to introduce you to the 80/20 lifestyle and also go over the content for this week. So the challenge that we're trying to address is one of our health and how do we keep ourselves healthy in the face of all of the pressures that we have in today's environment. And we know that 63% of Australian adults were overweight or obese in 2011 to 2012, and that is increased since 1995. We know that nearly 3 in 5 of us do not do enough exercise to keep us healthy. 92% of us don't eat enough vegetables, and over half of us don't eat enough fruit. And in terms of mental health, it's estimated that 20% of Australians have experienced a mental disorder in the last 12 months. Around 45%, almost half of us will experience a mental disorder sometime in their life. And at this current time, 1 in 10 Australians is taking antidepressant medication. So it's not a great picture. However, when you ask Australians about their health, 90% of us think that our health is good, very good, or excellent. And only 10% of us think that it's poor or fair. And that's in a 25 to 44-year-old age group. But when you look at older adults, it's nearly the same picture. 83% still rate it as good, very good, or excellent. And really that is not reflected in the health statistics. So what do we do about it? Well, the solution that we've come up with is something called the 80/20 lifestyle. So this is a way that we're going to educate you about all the things that really affect your health and give you lots of tips and tools along the way to make a series of small but sustainable lifestyle changes that will have a big impact over time. So the first bit is really discover what we call discover your health drivers. And it is important to understand where we've come from. And our genome really has not changed in 45,000 years. So we essentially have the same genome as a hunter-gatherer's genome that is wired for high levels of physical activity and not a lot of food. But now we've created an environment where we don't move very much and there's food available on every street corner, and lots of it was not even in existence 30 to 50 years ago. And that causes us a problem. So if we look at it this way, we all have a genotype. You get a set of genes from one parent and a set of genes from another parent, and there's nothing you can do about it. That is a fixed thing, your genotype. However, we now know that your genes can express themselves differently on a daily basis. Genes can get turned on or turned off or upregulated, that's in terms of expression, or downregulated. And the things that drive these are a lot of environmental choices that we make. Now, overall, this creates your phenotype. So your phenotype is you right here, right now, your current physical and mental health. And it comes from this equation. So we know the genotype is fixed. The environmental choices is the variable bit. And from the research, we know that there are 5 major things that will affect your gene expression on a daily basis. And these are the things that we have control over, is the ones I want to focus on. So the first one is how much you choose to move and on what intensity on a daily basis. Next is what you choose to put in your mouth several, if not dozens of times a day. Then it's how you choose to view and deal with the stresses that are in your life. The next is the environmental toxins that you choose to expose yourself to. And the last is a whole host of psychosocial factors that affect gene expression. Now, those 5 topics we will explore those over the next 5 weeks. So what we're going to do is have an in-depth look at all of these things that are under your conscious control that will affect your gene expression on a daily basis. But before we get into that, the next section that we want to cover off today is about designing a new strategy, designing a successful strategy around long-term health. So what I want you to do is just ponder for a moment. This is what I call the health and performance continuum. And it is this continuum, this clinical horizon. We do not want to be left of the clinical horizon. That is where we're having signs and symptoms of disease. Now, I want you to think about where you would like to be on this continuum. And most of us would like to be somewhere up towards the end. But really, that's not the right question to ask yourself. The question you should really ask yourself is, where are you prepared to get to? Now, to get up here, for a while I was prepared to do that, but I'm not anymore, because I know that being right up at this end of the spectrum involves not drinking any alcohol. And I'm Irish and ex-military, and I like a tipple. So I'm not prepared to not have alcohol in my life in order to get there. So it's a bit of a trade-off. Now, people who enjoy those sorts of things and want to have the ability to indulge in good food, good wine, and lots of treat foods, and not exercise because it's hard, you can do that. And your trade-off will be, you will be in the feeling okay, or maybe sliding further back. So this is really about where you are prepared to get to and where you're prepared to trade things off, right? That is key. So first thing is to decide where you're actually prepared to get to. Then if we have a look at some of the science, and this is what's called self-determination theory by Decky and Ryan. It's been around for over 30 years, and it's been applied very successfully to over 11 different health behavior topics, such as losing weight, reducing alcohol, drugs, those sorts of things, exercising more, improving your nutrition. And what these guys have shown is that there's a continuum of motivation. So the people on the left are really not motivated at all, right? So they don't see the need to change. What Decky and Ryan have shown is that lots of people, when they start to change, it's this phase of motivation that they get into. So typical motivations here is a reward. Someone will dangle a carrot at themselves, or somebody else will dangle a carrot. If you do this, you lose this weight, I'll buy you this, or whatever it may be. Or often they feel guilty about the behavior that they're doing, whether it's overeating or whether it's alcohol or drugs or not exercising, whatever it may be. Or very often they're being coerced. Someone is nagging them saying, you need to change. And eventually they go, all right, I'll bloody well change. Or it's one of these other things. Now, we know that this is very successful at getting people started. But what Decky and Ryan have proven over hundreds of different studies is that people who stay in this phase of motivation, the vast majority of them ultimately fail. So these are people who will lose a bit of weight and put it back on, or lose a bit more weight, put it back on, or they'll give up smoking for a while and then they'll start again, or they'll reduce their drinking for a while and then they'll start again. What Decky and Ryan have shown is the key for long-term behavior changes where you cross the threshold of autonomy to what they call being self-determined. This is where the individual finds their own reasons why it's important for them to change. Not for anybody else, but for them. And often here, we discover that these reasons tend to be emotional reasons. So Anthony Robbins has a saying, find your why and you'll find your way. And what we know is that reasons or whys that are largely emotional are much more successful. So for instance, some people may say they want to lose weight because they'll just look better and feel better. But ultimately it may come down to self-esteem. Or people, a more emotional reason is that I want to be a good role model for my kids, whatever the behavior may be. It is about finding an emotional reason why your life will be better when you have succeeded. So it's really worthwhile spending some time to try and find and discover why it is important for you, not for anybody else, to achieve a goal. Then, whenever you have a goal, and we know with all the research around goal setting, that this thing called baby's footsteps is critical. You've got to break your goal down into smaller goals, particularly if it's a long-term goal, because we need to keep the brain engaged in the process. And I like to take this one step further to break those mini goals down into behaviors, which I call rituals. Right? And so it's about little behaviors that you will do consistently. So let's take this. We talked about all the obesity crisis that we're having. We actually know that for people who go from being normal weight to overweight, the average weight gain is 2 to 3 kilos a year. So that's not a lot. And if we think about it in the context of this, let's do a little thought experiment. If you were to remain weight stable over the next year, so all things being equal, you're weight stable. If you were to add in 1 Tim Tam a day, every day for a year, by the end of the year, you'll have put on 2 to 3 kilos of fat. Conversely, if you're to walk up and down 2 flights of stairs extra a day, everything else being equal, and you do that every day for a year, by the end of that year, you'll have lost between 1.5 and 2.5 kilos of fat, depending on your starting weight. So at Ritualize, we're big believers in these little things that you do consistently that create big changes over time. And actually, this research is backed up by a guy called Professor B.J. Fogg at Stanford University in the United States. And he has what's called the Fogg behavior model. For him, for behavior to happen, you need 3 things to collide. A, you need some level of motivation. B, you need the ability to do that behavior. And third, you need to be triggered. And there's a trade-off between motivation and ability represented by this line. Now, B.J. Fogg has shown that for achieving goals, you're much better off to create lots of little behaviors and then trigger yourself to do those behaviors. That is a more successful strategy than having a few big behaviors such as, I'm going to work out 3 times a week, right? It's actually not as successful as doing lots of little things. So I actually applied this quite successfully a few years ago. At the age of 40, I decided to become a professional boxer. And here, much to my wife's disgust, was my half of the bathroom mirror. Now, if we look at this, here's my goal right up at the top. Here's my why. So being authentic it's a very important value of mine. I wanted to get into that ring as an authentic professional boxer. Now, I had some hard things to do, 2-hour training sessions and stuff like that. But here I had lots of little things that I could do right there, right then. And you'll see when you look at the exercise section, you'll recognize things like frogs and snakes and Hindis and scissors. And I decided that my trigger to do the behavior was actually going to be the mirror. So every time I saw the mirror, I did something right there and then, whether it was 20 Hindis or 50 frogs or whatever it may be. And this way, these numbers got bigger and bigger and bigger every single week. And that actually helped me when I did my fight to actually end up winning the fight. And I think if I hadn't have had this, what I call a ritual board, I wouldn't have won the fight, because I ended up doing 500 to 1,000 of these by the end of my training. That was over and above all the training that I'd scheduled to do. So now actually we have created an online version of this ritual board, and the whole idea is that those small steps create big changes. And so for that, you will set a number of different rituals, and we encourage you to set lots of little rituals. And then the key thing is, when you're setting your rituals, you can set reminders on any given day, and you can actually set them for multiple times a day. And then it'll pop up on your phone to remind you whether it's drink water, or hey, today's an alcohol-free day, or have your veggies at your breakfast, whatever it may be. And we will suggest lots of rituals for you as you go through the process. And you can also make these rituals private as well. So that's the key thing. If they're personal, make them private. But your ritual board is going to be absolutely key for success. So that's a bit of a quick introduction to the 80-20 lifestyle and around our methodology of behavior change. But ultimately, the last word goes to Morpheus. And it's about whether you choose the red pill of continuing along, just trundling along, enjoying the finer things in life because they're actually fine, and not getting too uncomfortable with exercise, or whether you choose the blue pill of setting yourself some goals, filling out your ritual board, and creating these little habits that will actually help you achieve your goals, and then see where that takes you. The choice in all of this is yours, but if you choose to get along with the journey, we will give you lots of tools and lots of tips along the way to help you to become a better version of yourself.